up. A couple of notes. Today, Craig, it is KU.
Yeah, it's Kansas's turn, so I don't know where we are in terms of the numbers of days. What do we do? Like this is like number 6 or 7 or something, I think, at this point.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know where we are. It's a big league, so we are trudging through, and this is just a time, as you said, to just take a look at what was released a couple of weeks ago. So here is KU in 2025, and obviously a team last year, not getting to the full breakdown, but a team last year that had a lot of high hopes, Big 12 championship aspirations, one might even say. And they started off with a win and then proceeded to lose 5 straight games and then got into a situation where they had to just nearly win out to make a bowl game. They won a game, lost another game, and it led to having to win 4 straight. They won 3 and then got to that final game and just got obliterated by Baylor and cut their season short. So it's been a rough 2024-25 like main sports calendar for the Jayhawks fans out there.
This was supposed to be high level.
This was supposed to be a Renaissance year in Lawrence, where you're like, we finally got it all going. Everything's pointing in the right direction, and it just, man. Yeah,
got off to too bad of a start in football. Nearly recovered to get into the postseason, but just fell short in that final game. So here we are, and I think the expectations are, once again, pretty big. I think there's a different kind of pressure now applied to Lance Leipold of he can't really have the year that you had last year. You can't get off to that bad of a start. You can't not make a bowl game with the upward trajectory that you had. You've also got your stadium back in business this year after all the big hundreds of millions of dollars of renovations. They'll be back at David Booth Kansas Memorial Stadium this year. So that is cool in terms of just some of the details of this schedule. But it gets started off in week 0. So they start off early. And because of this, they are the second team that we've talked about in the Big 12 that will have 3 bye weeks this year. So 3 different bye weeks for KU that we will break down. But Fresno State, right off the top, Saturday, August 23rd. Again, that's week 0. That is how things will get rolling for KU at home at Memorial Stadium. They'll turn around and then on a Friday take on Wagner. So interesting Friday matchup there. That's not like a big opponent by any means, but you'll have that Friday game at home, and then you hit the road for what should be a very juicy matchup because we have not seen it in quite some time, but there is a lot of history there as Kansas and Missouri take on each other on September the 6th. 120 meetings, a series that dates back to 1891. It is tied for the 10th most played rivalry in the history of college football, and they have not played in 14 years. So for the first time since 2011, it will be Kansas and Missouri, and this game will also be, according to KU, the first time they played on one another's campus since 2006. So even though they played in 2011, it was 5 more years prior to that before they last played at each other's spots. So there you go, Fresno State at home, Wagner at home on a Friday, and then on a Saturday, they head out for their first road trip, and it's a big one, at SEC's Missouri Tigers.
Fresno State is always one of those teams, if you open up with them, it's like you're kind of asking for trouble, because you never quite know. They've been remarkably consistent over the years. They have their dips because, again, that's kind of what you are, that kind of school. But as, a G5 goes, Fresno State knows how to pull themselves up with the bootstraps and be pretty damn good.
When they had Pat Hill as the head coach.
Yeah, I mean, and look, their quarterback from last year, Mikey Keene, is going to Michigan, to hold the place there until Bryce Underwood is ready. And I'll tell you, I think Mikey Keene and that Michigan offense, they'll have 3 more wins with him than they did last year, just because he's that much better than the guys that they had. Now, if they can go get one Mikey Keene, they can go get another, which makes them scary. I think the biggest thing with Kansas is, does Jalen Daniels look like he's played football in a few months again? Last year during that 5-game losing streak, it just looked like he was still like getting used to playing football again. And then when they went on their winning streak, he looked like Jalen Daniels. So if he looks like that early, should be really good. Mizzou has to replace the quarterback. No Luther Burden. A lot of Theo Weiss out the door there too. So a lot of playmakers gone, but they're throwing a bunch of money at everything at Mizzou, so I expect them to be formidable, and that's a rivalry game on the road in SEC school. This is 2 out of the 3 first games are tough for the Jayhawks.
Has any conference, formerly a conference, the Big Eight, had more rivalries disintegrate because of realignment?
I mean, I can't imagine off the top of my head. I mean, Nebraska, Oklahoma.
Against all of those Midwestern schools.
I mean, all of them against each other. Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma, Missouri was one that got reignited this year that I know was a big deal for a lot of people because that was a rivalry that not necessarily is held in the highest regard as far as Oklahoma because it's behind Texas, it's behind Bedlam. But I mean, it was one that, definitely was missed. So yeah, I mean, you could basically just do the round robin of all of those teams. I mean, Nebraska, Missouri. I mean, go around it. Colorado, Nebraska. I mean, round and round and round. So yeah, I guess not. But there you go. That's a very interesting first 3 weeks of the schedule, and then their first of 3 bye weeks. So there you go with that. They'll come back on September the 20th, and they will open Big 12 play at home against West Virginia and Rich Rodriguez. They'll be back at home the following week as they will take on the Cincinnati Bearcats. So two home games following the bye week and the non-conference schedule. You will then go on the road for your first Big 12 matchup, and that will be against UCF. And they're different now, obviously, with Scott Frost as the new head coach there. Just the second meeting ever between Kansas and UCF. First time ever Kansas will travel out to Orlando. So they will be in was it FBC Mortgage Stadium for the first time? And so I would think that that's maybe a game outside. Missouri's probably the game you circle, right? Like that's the game if you're traveling plans, you're putting those together. Like Missouri's probably the game you have at the top of the list. But I think going out to Orlando for the first time might be, a backup as well. So they'll take on UCF, and then they will be on the road for a second consecutive week. The only time that happens in the first part of the schedule right here in the middle, they will go to Lubbock to take on Texas Tech before getting their second bye week. So that second stretch, 4 Big 12 games, 2 at home, 2 on the road, West Virginia, Cincy, and then Orlando and Lubbock before you take your second breather of the schedule.
I like their shot at especially if they're 3-0. Coming out of the first 3 or 2-1, to go 3-1 in this stretch or better. I mean, I like that. I think I think they've got some nice ebbs and flows early on here for themselves, but it's this second flip that I'm most interested in. But you should be ahead of where West Virginia, Cincinnati, and UCF are if you're Kansas.
Yes.
If you think that you are who you are, you should be ahead of them at this point in the season.
West Virginia is the one that's got me kind of scratching my head. I'm like, could they be pretty good with Rich Rod? Like pretty quickly?
He might give them a pretty not.
I don't mean like Noel Devine era,
how quickly can he make them good?
Right.
Yeah, how quickly can they be scary? And
that's better with the transfer portal.
I'd rather play them on September 20th than October 20th.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So there's your second of 4 legs on this schedule because of all the bye weeks. So you'll come back October 25th, rested again, and then it is the big rivalry, the Sunflower Showdown, Kansas State at home in Lawrence. And it has been a long time, fellas. Do y'all know how much the streak has reached now at this point? How many games the streak is currently at in terms of Kansas State and winning this rivalry?
Late in the 2010s?
16 consecutive wins for the Wildcats. 16 consecutive. So KU will look to break that, and they'll have the chance to do that at home. They'll be back at home the following week against Oklahoma State, and then the final game of this stretch of the schedule. Like these 3 bye weeks, man, like you start early, you play a Friday game as well in week 1 technically, but you do get a lot of breaks. So this is just a 3-game little part of the schedule here. K-State at home, Oak State at home, and then you travel out to Arizona. So that will be a first-time meeting as Big 12 opponents, the Jayhawks and the Wildcats.
Yeah, this one, look, that Tech by Kansas State, that's tough. Like even with the bye in the middle, those two back-to-back games should be pretty tough, given the fact that Texas Tech probably has one of the deeper rosters in the league, especially after all the acquisitions they've made. Kansas State, another year with Avery Johnson, should be really good. Then you get two teams that I think are going to struggle in Oklahoma State and Arizona before that, the last part of it. But this is a bit of a roller coaster as far as the schedule goes on paper, where it's like,
How often do you guys, when you're looking at this, Paul, do you look at the logos?
I don't so much anymore, because especially with this conference that we know so well, I look at the rosters. So right now, when I look at who's going to have really good rosters on their schedule, Mizzou went and got Bo Prabula, who's going to replace Brady Cook, who hasn't played a lot, but when he played well. West Virginia, I'm not sure about their roster. Cincinnati, UCF, but Tech has a really deep roster.
Yeah,
Kansas State is a deep roster.
Not back-to-back, but back-to-back on the schedule.
Here's the thing, though. There's not really logo teams on here.
Yeah.
No, that's right. They're gone. Yep.
And then you look at Oklahoma State and Arizona. Like Oklahoma State, tell me their starting 11 on either side of the ball right now.
Yeah, I would think Oklahoma State and Arizona are probably, and maybe Cincinnati as well, probably going to be at the bottom of the poll. But then again, if it's like last year, they will be winning the conference. So that could be the toughest stretch for all we know. But they will play Arizona to close out that stretch.
Yeah, and so when I look at the rosters here, they've got a kind of a half and half here, where half the teams they play have really, they know what their roster really is going to be set up wise as they head into spring and then head into fall practice. And then they've got half the teams here that are generally in flux.
Yeah. So then it leads into, after that Arizona game, another bye week, the third and final bye week. And then they will have just 2 games remaining there in late November as we start to get the holidays kick-started with Thanksgiving and whatnot. At Iowa State will start that 4th and final leg, and then it will be Utah at home on Saturday, November the 29th, that will close out this schedule. So that is KU. So you've got all Saturday games except for week 1, which is their second week of the season, against Wagner on that Friday night. But outside of that, all Saturday games. You got 7 home games, 5 road games, and those 5 road trips, man, pretty solid. Like, pretty damn solid if you're a Kansas fan. You're trying to figure out where to go. You've got the Missouri rivalry rekindled, so that'll probably be near the top of the list for people. But you can go out to Orlando and experience the bounce house for the first time ever. That's pretty cool. You can go out to Lubbock, and I know that, sometimes it gets a bad rap, but, dude, for college kids,
but you're not going to Lubbock
to live
for a vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to experience one of the coolest things they have to offer.
And they have a great game day.
Texas Tech,
And they have a great game day. They got plenty of places to eat and drink, and they got good tailgating, and they've got the stadium revamped, and that'll be big and glorious and all that. So that's a good choice. And they'll probably be, they should be. They've paid to be, and I don't mean that as an insult. It's true. They put it out there hey, we are expecting to compete, and we are putting our money where our mouth is. So that might be a very big game. And then you've got Tucson, head out west, especially in November, get a little warm weather, or just wait a week and then go to Ames, which will probably be freezing cold on November the 22nd. But that's a place with its own set of diehard fans and a great atmosphere. So I think there's some good choices there. The 3 bye weeks is maybe a benefit. We'll see on that. But I think it's an early start, but it's definitely a unique schedule, and it's one that I think it all just depends on if Kansas can live up to its expectations. And also, of course, what the hell does the Big 12 actually look like? Yeah. Because we talked about this a year ago. We were like, man, going to Stillwater, guys. I don't know. And then if we did it in reality, it's they're going to beat Oklahoma. So who knows? But there you have the Kansas schedule for 2025. Yeah. I think it's pretty interesting, pretty fun.
Yeah, the last 2 at Iowa State. And then, again, I'll die on this hill about Utah. I think they had a problem, one legitimate problem. Everything else was, pimples. Like they had one scar and a bunch of pimples, and I think they solved that
Well,
with
it
Devin
was
Dampier.
just,
I
wonder if that
it was a weight. It was
Cam
That
Rising
BYU outcome turns out differently, though. We're maybe looking at it a little bit differently if
Yeah.
they win that game, because at least you got that, and it maybe just makes everything taste a little different,
Yeah.
But, yeah, what were you going to say,
Well,
Cam
no,
Rising?
Yeah, no, with the Cam Rising thing just had to eventually just emotionally wear you down. Like you just never knew, and no matter what, if you did, it was a constant weight, and it was a disappointment, one after another. And you wonder if that just eventually wore them out. They ran out of gas emotionally.
I think it definitely had something to do with it. Not everything to do with it, but definitely had to have some it had to weigh them down in some form or fashion, I would think, because I know it not on all of us just watching of like, is he playing or not? And at this point, we don't care. So I'd imagine there's probably somebody in that locker room that felt the same way, but they don't play. They played all these teams last year, so it's not like you're going on some long drought like some conferences, but no Baylor, no Houston, no TCU. So the only Texas team of the four they play is Tech and in Lubbock, and then also no Arizona State, no BYU, no Colorado. So does that play in their favor?
I don't think you ever know any Big 12.
We don't know.
I mean, we don't know.
But on paper, which is what this whole exercise is, there's probably 4 contenders in that group of 6.
Yep.
So maybe you missed out in a good way on that. But I think that's a bowl-eligible schedule. I love that you're playing Missouri again. I'm glad to see that. I think that'll be a great atmosphere.
By the way, new coach at Fresno State, that opening game, Matt Entz, who was at North Dakota State for a couple of years. So in that tree that North Dakota State, Craig Bohl, Chris Kleiman, Entz, so that will be a new coach. Fresno State was a team that you always, when Pat Hill was there, their most successful coach was, I think, Jim Sweeney in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. But they can be careful there. KU, well, they really did. The expectations were big, and Jalen Daniels was just not ready, and so.
And I haven't mentioned his name at all, but yeah, he's back, and he should have no problem knocking the rust off. There should be no rust. He should be fully rust-free at this point. So maybe he's a player of the year candidate in the league. Maybe he's, bigger than that. I won't go that far at all. We got to see a lot more before I'd ever start, pumping anything up other than like honorable mention or second team or whatever, maybe first team all Big 12. But that is one thing you're excited about. They're going to lose some players, but we'll get to that later on in the summer and when that's actually closer and concrete. But they will be losing some talent, but I think you still feel like you should be able to get to a bowl game and get back there after missing out with that final loss of the season in the final week of the season last year and falling just short.